before me?
Yeah, we will. We're just going live now.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. This is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Wednesday, February 12th, 2025 at 9:04 in the morning. So we're beginning our day to have an introduction and walkthrough of H-124, an act relating to the Commissioner of Financial Regulation and Annual Supervision and Regulation Report. So with that, sponsor of the bill is Representative Priestley. If you'd like to,
Take the hot seat.
if you can, whatever you. Good morning, Representative.
Good morning. So good. Representative Monique Priestley. Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad we're taking this up to look into it. I guess one thing that prompted submitting this was just a lot of questions like coming up in a variety of different bills that we took up last year. As far as DFR and in general, like communication to companies and things like that. So I ended up having conversations with a few different folks who just raised that there isn't currently an annual report requirement. And then also that it doesn't seem like most departments I looked at through the auditor's site have been like most departments have been audited and agencies have been audited. And it doesn't seem like DFR has been. And so I assumed one of the kind of initial starting points for reference for an audit would be an annual report. And so the annual report is just going off of some like basics that like every other state seems to have. It seems like we're one of the few, if not only state that doesn't have our Department of Financial Regulation have an annual reporting requirement. And so also have like a variety of different reports from other states to look into. But so this bill basically just goes off of some of the basics that are found in other states. And I think there's also maybe some additional areas that might be interesting, like during the earned wage access testimony when we were talking about capping of fees. Like it'd be interesting. It sounds like there might be like a waive process for fee caps, and so that's something like I'm curious if that's something that could be added. But in general, just a starting point for a reporting mechanism.
Questions for Representative Priestley?
Yeah, so I'm sorry.
Almost let me get away from
You mentioned around earned wage services. What can you repeat?
just
that?
so I think in general there was a lot of questions around like actually I think Tony asked one about like fee caps and things like that. And so I was just curious, like it sounds like from employees to DFR that there might be a mechanism to like waive fees for different like by industry or things like that. And I'm just like, I'm curious, there's some other things that might come up that the just stating that like the mechanisms in the reports are just a starting point. And I don't know if there's other areas that we want to explore. So
This would be part of our discussion of the bill. Is that it? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Maria.
Morning. Maria Royal with Legislative Council. And we will do a walkthrough of the bill, 124. Thank you, Representative Priestley. You did a great job. So it's not very long, but we'll go through each of the provisions just so you can see what's contemplated to be included in the annual reporting requirement. So it's a new section of law. And it specifies that the Commissioner of Financial Regulation shall prepare an annual supervision and regulation report applicable to persons, services, and products subject to the department's jurisdiction. The purpose of the report is to inform the public and provide transparency about the department's supervisory and regulatory policies and actions and current conditions relevant to the industries the department regulates. The report shall include One, a general description of regulatory compliance within each industry, including the number and nature of examinations, investigations, enforcement actions, and consumer complaints. Two, a general description of the financial and market conditions relevant to each industry, particularly as they relate to the availability and affordability of products and services for consumers. Three, an assessment of regulatory fees, including an itemization of the revenue collected and the regulatory functions supported, and whether current fees are comparable to those charged in other jurisdictions. Four, a review of emerging trends and developments within each industry, including a description of new products and services and recommendations for ensuring the regulatory environment is sufficiently responsive to those trends and developments. And finally, five, any other information the commissioner deems relevant to the purpose of the report as stated in this subsection. And the initial report is due on January 15th of next year, and then annually thereafter. And the only other thing I was going to mention, just for historical purposes, there was a reporting requirement, an annual reporting requirement, a DFR report, and actually, if you want to look at that language, we can. In fact, why don't I do that? Pull that up just so you can. Okay. Yes, so this is a reporting requirement. It was enacted in the year 2000. It was amended a couple of times, but ultimately repealed in 2009. So we can just kind of go through what the old reporting requirement was. And interestingly enough, I had a copy of one of the last ones, because I worked in banking for a little bit. And this might be familiar to Herb Olson. His name is on that report. Do you remember? Anyway. So the prior requirement was stated that the Commissioner of Banking, it was then Fishka, now DFR, shall prepare and submit consistent, that's just a reference to annual reporting requirements, to procedures for publishing the report and getting it out to legislators on the following subjects. 1A, the commissioner shall report annually on or before June 1st to the governor as to the conditions of persons regulated by the banking division. The commissioner shall report annually on or before September 1st to the governor as to the conditions of all insurance companies chartered by or doing business in the state. The reports may be separate and shall contain statements as to the financial condition of each institution and any other information or recommendations which the commissioner deems appropriate. The report shall also contain a review of the rules of the department, regardless of the process for adopting such rules, at a frequency such that each rule is reviewed at least every 5 years for efficiency and effectiveness in carrying out policies and goals of this state relating to financial institutions, insurance mechanisms, and the sale of investments. The annual report shall contain a listing of the subsidiary and affiliate organizations formed or owned by a Vermont financial institution for the purpose of engaging in any of the powers authorized by Section 14106 of this title. The report shall also contain a listing of the amount of a Vermont financial institution's loans and assets invested in such organizations. And the commissioner shall cause the annual report to be published for general distribution, distributed to the legislative members. And then in addition, then what's included in the report, the Managed Behavioral Healthcare Organizations Task Force, pursuant to subsection 4089BG of this title, as well as healthcare budget projections. And they were due in January 15th, and they could be consolidated into a single report. So that's just for historical purposes.
Sure. I'll just say that whoever put together H 127 did a far better job than what was done back in 2000 in terms of being concise and clear about what's intended by them. I have another question. Go ahead. Good, go ahead. I think this is, personally, I think it's a good idea. I think that in particular, the department does a good job in terms, or from what I know, does a fairly good job of investigating compliance with the laws and regulations that are administered by the department. And I think that's only for the good to let people know, what you're doing in that regard. I think my specific question about the bill is whether it is intended to cover. I know there's this bifurcation in certain investigations, consumer complaints between, what the department does and what the Green Mountain Care Board. I mean, the Green Mountain Care Board does a lot of the higher level approvals, but my understanding is that the department still does a lot of the nitty gritty consumer complaints, investigations, examinations. Is this report intended to cover that work?
It doesn't specifically call out that work. So it's a great point, though. And maybe that's something that should be clarified.
So 24 or the 20, this new language added in 25 would cover all the activity going on in chapters of 8 BSA. So fire and casualty insurance, health insurance, everything's going on in fidelity, surety. And is that do you have a sense of how much of a time commitment this might be for DFR?
I don't. That'd be a great question for DFR.
Anne Marie, I was just wondering, I just looked up the Act 33 and it looks like it repealed. I was just wondering if you looked
Why
into the
repeal?
repeal one. Yeah, it looks like it repealed like every report.
So, yeah.
Of everything.
No, I think I remember now at that time, the government operations committees, I think at that time was looking at the annual reporting requirements and tried to make a determination as to whether they were necessary.
Okay.
So that all these annual reports, and there are many, the legislature often says report and then indefinitely. It was an opportunity to go back and see, do you want to continue receiving all these reports? This was one of the ones they chose not to continue. And the legislature added language with respect to all annual reports, that they're only good for 5 years unless you specify otherwise. So sometimes you'll not withstand that 5-year. So I think it was just it got swept up in all of that review of all of the administrative reporting requirements and
Generally, what happens now is that, and I was vice chair then, but I don't remember. But generally, Government Operations Committee will send us the list of reports that are relevant to this committee.
Okay.
And we'll look at them and then we'll send back the ones that we want to say, yeah, it's good, take them out, or ones that, no, we need to continue having them. So, but I don't remember deal with the big one. And maybe the report just wasn't relevant anymore to what we needed. Dave?
Actually, that was my question. Happened to it.
More of a statement than a question that I forgot in the intro is just looking at other states, like the reason it seems like every other state does this. One of the reasons is also not only to like make sure things are, going smoothly and stuff like that, but to find sources of revenue, since so many of the services that fall under something like DFR include fees that the state is then getting. And then basically making sure that the fees and that kind of stuff that's bringing in revenue to the state is being adjusted on a regular basis accordingly, so that the legislature can like make adjustments. as
Well,
needed.
and on the flip side of that, because I think we've seen some of that this year, in revisions of the BAA is that sometimes we might put on too heavy of a.
Yeah, yeah.
And we start losing, licensees.
Mhm.
You know, insurance companies will cut back on how many people they'll license in the state, and so that's reflected as well, so. And that's, of course, not our jurisdiction, but I think it's beneficial to Ways and Means to be able to receive that information. Maria, when it's set up as, going to the General Assembly as a whole, is that instead of coming to the committees of jurisdiction, instead of coming here, going to Ways and Means? But I'm just wondering if that might make it harder for the committees of jurisdiction to know that this report is there and.
I think that's a good point. So you can specify the committees of jurisdiction. Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
You know, we talk about reports all the time and, especially when we have chairs out, making sure that reports are relevant, that there's something that you're gonna look at. You don't want to do a report just to do a report. We're overwhelming our, departments and agencies already with reports. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing is, something that is needed and something that we are going to follow year after year, so. And be very specific, we need to be very specific in what our goals are. And what we want to see, in the report in order to attain those goals. So this is kind of the government accountability piece that.
If I could directly address that and point that I was raising about the department does a lot of work in terms of taking in consumer complaints and investigating violations of the law around health insurance, again, on the sort of individual kind of level. And so my thought in including that, and as you say, the value, I think, of having that kind of report is to tell the legislature what is actually being done. And I think, you know, part of it is the bifurcation of responsibilities between the department and the board. But I think people have lost this sense about what actually is being done around some of the things that really bug consumers. So I think that would be a value. Whether it should be defining the committee of jurisdiction might be tricky there because maybe a couple of committees.
Well, I mean, when we're talking about healthcare, it's the one we don't do. And so
Correct.
that's our healthcare committee that would be named for on that report as well. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of information that DFR collects that could be valuable to the committees and valuable to the public to know that, yes, we do have, it's not just the AG that's out there looking over, making sure consumers are protected, but it's also our Department of Financial Regulation. And, you know, what are they seeing out there? What are the issues that are going on? And also, I think in the report, we want to know how they're interacting with the Attorney General's office as well.
Yeah.
I think, you know, how many referrals did they get from the AG? How many did they provide the AG with it? Those types of things. So I think it's well worth the discussion. Anything else from Maria?
I just wanted to highlight the importance, I think, of part 4 about reviewing emerging trends. I think that's super important because it allows us to be proactive instead of reactive. And we all know the speed of government isn't the fastest.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, the department generally will come to us with new trends and what's going on in the industry, and we did a few things and to try out like the sandbox. They could work in some of these new pieces, but I think it's good for the public to know what industry is bringing forward to the state, and they take a look at the report, they'll see some of these new trends that are happening. Anything else from Maria? Maria, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Auditor, would you like to join us?
Thank you. Yes, I think I can't join you without the approval or permission of Anna Grace, so, but that's all right. Whatever works for you.
You're on, so there you
There
go.
it is. Okay, thank you. So first, thanks for inviting me. Second, as you can imagine, I'm a big fan of transparency and accountability. So anytime, you guys go to an entity, a state entity, and ask them to do more reporting, I'm generally supportive as long as it's not redundant and they're not already doing it, and that they can manage the time requirements for sure. As it turns out, DFR, as with most entities, does report some performance data with their budget submission. That is required by law and has been since the 90s in 32307C2. And I looked at their most recent. I don't think they've been into appropriations yet, so I didn't see 26. But for last year, they did have a page or two for each of the 4 divisions within DFR. And you guys can look it up from the JFO site or from the House of Prop site. Actually, I'm sorry I didn't send a link. But they do provide some useful information about outputs, some outcomes. So they're already putting in the time to some extent. Some of the requests you made in 124 are very interesting, as you just discussed, in terms of trends and what's happening in the industry. And that could be of value to you. And certainly they think about it, so they could just share their thoughts with you. But I'm generally very supportive. It's up to DFR to tell you how much time would be required, but I'm not sure that should be a barrier. Everybody, all state entities should report regularly to you guys. It doesn't have to be a tome, it doesn't have to be 50 pages, but there's got to be a line between too little and too much, and I'm sure they can find that.
Yeah. Any questions for the auditor? Is there anything else in there, Doug, that we haven't captured that you think would be important for us to ask?
I think it looks pretty good. Just for as an aside, we have just initiated an audit of the customer service performance of 4 different state entities, one of which is DFR, the insurance division, I believe, as the commissioner knows. So that's kind of fun. I mean, we picked them because they do get quite a few complaints. I'm not sure how they deal with them. The audit isn't looking at exactly how DFR resolves them all, only the process they have for ensuring that people get a response in a timely manner and the good records are kept and that sort of thing. So I was glad to see that in there.
Okay. Anything else for Doug? Doug, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Good morning, Sandy.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I apologize I can't be there in person. I have dedicated members of my team in the room though, and would invite them to clarify anything that they wish to. Hopefully you can hear me all. It looks like you
Yes,
can.
we can. All good.
Excellent. Thank you. We are always appreciative of being invited to weigh in on bills, and in particular this one. And I think there was already some great discussion around the room about the need and the benefits and purposes and the history. I have to say that I remember the annual reporting and the information that went into that. And also, I think maybe for perspective, one of the reasons why it was repealed, I'm not going to speculate too much on staffing and resources back then, but I would say that as state departments and agencies have built out their websites and have reports and links to rules and information about the insurance companies and the banks and the, all of the entities that DFR regulates publicly available on our website. I think that that is maybe one of the reasons why, our state auditor talked a little bit about redundancy. I think that there's quite a bit of information publicly available, and certainly we are always interested in improving any aspects of public transparency and the methods in which the public can access that information, including the legislature and others. So, from our standpoint, when this bill came across our desks, I did ask our department leadership and management to analyze what would it take to comply, and what would it look like based on each of the sections of this bill. And collectively, I think that we do have some concerns about the bill, its purpose, its benefits, how it will be used. And, primarily, I have to say that the language of the bill is overly broad. I think I picked up on some of the conversations around the room a few moments ago. And so it does, the vagueness of it, I think, calls into question the scope and the focus of the information that folks are looking to obtain and have us report on. I do think that, we are constrained by our data technology and staffing resources. So I believe it would be costly to comply, and we would have to add some resources. Just by mere introduction of the bill, originally it did seem that it implied that DFR lacks transparency. And again, when in fact there is a vast amount of information available to the public already. And we would be interested in really understanding what's needed and what might be missing, and work with the committee on clarifying the scope of the bill. So I do have some, if time allows, I do have some points that go section by section of the bill, and hoping that that will assist the committee in considering, narrowing the scope or improving the language where need be.
Okay.
All right. So let's see, let's see. So I am looking at section 25A, where it begins to talk about the commissioner shall prepare an annual supervision and regulation report to persons, services, products, so on and so forth. I think maybe clarifying if persons include companies or firms. Again, is the purpose to inform the public and provide transparency about the department's supervisory and regulatory policies, actions, and current conditions relevant to the industries the department regulates. Perhaps some of that could be added to help clarify that language there. And, again, the public can go to our website to see our mission statement. There's links to laws, there's regulatory policies, rules, and the names and of the entities that we regulate. Any actions, I would say, taken against the company go through a court proceeding, so that information, once it's in the court, is publicly available and posted on our website. With respect to captives, I would say that there's no consumer protection issues with captives. So, again, there's information on our website that I think is generally publicly available, aggregate data and things like that. All of the names of the companies we regulate and their Vermont address. Section 25A1 pertains to the general description of regulatory compliance within each industry. including nature of exams, investigations, and complaints. If we could clarify each industry and whether the intent is to mean, the divisions of or the industries of securities, banking, insurance, captives, or is it should it be more granular, like banking, credit unions, lenders, brokers, servicers? Also, maybe clarify what is meant by the nature of exams, investigations. I have to say that there are certain investigations, complaints. A lot of that process is confidential. We could provide the number of exams, complaints, etc. But there's maybe some barriers or challenges about the expectations to align with what DFR can provide under this bill. And regarding consumer complaints and enforcement actions, we can run reports that aggregate consumer complaints by line of business and reason. Enforcement actions are public and easy to gather. So DFR doesn't anticipate the need for additional resources for those specific items. From a market conduct perspective, the department already gathers the relevant information, but additional work would primarily be related to Section 4 of the bill, which requires us to identify and describe emerging trends in the regulatory response and needs. But this would not also necessarily require additional resources. Regarding going back to investigations, I think we may, have some, concerns about confidentiality and at what point are we releasing information and at what level. The health team, still on 25A1, could produce such a report on health insurance without additional staff, but the department would be concerned about the potential burden on the market conduct and company licensing teams. Since subsections 1, 2, and 3 would require input from those teams for every line of insurance, it would probably take a little time to conduct the research necessary to, for example, find out what other states charge for company licensing, but it wouldn't be any more burdensome than other health-related reports the department has previously been tasked with. For captives, maybe suggest to include a description of what is regulated and what the population of regulated entities looks like each year, and maybe how that has changed. This is already, again, provided in our aggregate data reporting, which is available on our website. Regarding Section 25A2, this is about general description of the financial and market conditions, availability and affordability of product services for consumers, etc. With respect to securities and banking, I would say that the language is broad and the information requested, specifically availability and affordability of products. This isn't data that divisions normally collect for banking and securities. So we're unsure how to obtain that data specific to Vermont without significant expense internally and potentially externally. With respect to captives for this section, again, captive insurers in Vermont are not consumer facing. So there are no products or services for consumers. Generally, affordability and availability drive the need for captives. There are market conditions and trends in captive insurance that are constantly changing. I would say, reporting would be a point in time, and the information about trends and market conditions would quickly change and possibly be outdated shortly thereafter. But one suggestion could be that we provide articles on our website if that would be helpful, or links to articles we often contribute to. Regarding health, with respect to subsections 2 and 3, the department already makes a substantial amount of material available to health insurance available to the public on our website. Once again, I think there's a common theme here. Apologies. Information that's not on our website, however, is typically publicly accessible. For instance, DFR describes the financial and market conditions with respect to health insurers in its annual solvency letters, which can be accessed at a website with respect to rate review. DFR believes it's unlikely that there would be barriers to producing any information this report would require. One consideration that's unique to health insurance is that with respect to trends and developments within the industry, there isn't a lot of information about the ERISA market, which is the fastest growing segment of private health insurance coverage. Another consideration is that much of the policy discussion, like the AHEAD model, is driven by AHS, and DFR is not typically in a position to report on the merits of those policies, except insofar as they relate to insurer solvency. With regard to P&C insurance, if a general description of the financial and market conditions relevant to each industry is interpreted as high-level commentary and not an in-depth detailed analysis, then this should not require additional department resources. With respect to 25A3, assessment of regulatory fees, whether current fees are comparable to those charged in other jurisdictions. I would say, retaliatory fees in an insurance is very broad, and there are several fees in jurisdictions which would make it complicated to compare generally. So I think that there may be some clarifications to seek here in this section as well. 25A4, review of emerging trends and developments within the industry, including description of new products. I think I already made some comments about that. And I think, Vermont also is not, with respect to, I would say, the insurance industry, we're typically not the first place an issue or trend emerges. So the department might be asked about issues and trends and what DFR is doing to look into or act on or prevent when there isn't available or relevant data for Vermont. Trends also could emerge slowly, so deciding when to identify a trend for reporting could be challenging. And I think I'll stop there and see if there's questions or if staff in the room would like to elaborate or speak a little bit more to some of those details.
Emily's coming.
Hi, guys. I don't know if you can see me. I don't want to repeat any. Emily Brown, Department of Financial Regulation in the Insurance Division. And I don't want to repeat anything that Sandy said. And a point that I just wanted to emphasize is that we do have a lot of information. I just think it's in different places and sometimes can feel very overwhelming to access when you're trying to find something. Even myself being at the department, right? It's where's this report? What does it say? You kind of have to remind yourself. And then also, as the auditor mentioned, the PPMB report that we have been required to submit, we actually, within the past 2 years, have really beefed up what we're reporting, the metrics. So I agree with Sandy's comments about, being more specific, but I'm also wondering if there would be an opportunity to work with the committee or Representative Priestley on looking at the data we have now. And even if it's taking that information and putting it in a document that we can then hand over to the committee and the legislature and say, here's where, this is what the information is, here's how to access it. And then also if there, for instance, are extra data points that we should be reporting in the PPMB, we could do that. Just because I do agree with what the commissioner said about it being potentially a lot of extra information, like you saw the previous report, and then it not really being useful because it's so big. So that was really my only comment, is just, giving the department opportunity to really, be able to demonstrate what we are doing. And then if there are gaps, like I think the emerging trend one is very interesting. But again, that could be, there's hundreds of insurance products out there. So that could be, yes, if it's at a high level, a very easy way to say, yep, we're seeing X, Y, and Z. And if the committee was interested in learning more, we could come in and do a presentation. But to actually do a thorough analysis of all emerging trends just feels very overwhelming, and would be, I think, a big burden on our staff. So those are the only comments I wanted to add. And I'm sure Sandy's welcome to take questions, or myself.
But, I think that, some of that emerging trends and it could be as simple as getting in touch with the association and seeing what they have going on, and just kind of putting it out there that, we're seeing, this is what we're hearing from the industry. It may be coming. Something as simple as, I don't think we're looking for anything in depth.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think that if we had a report that came back that actually had all of the links to it.
Yep.
I know other agencies and departments are doing that now. We're just providing those links. And then maybe a little more substantive on some other things. So
Yeah.
I think that if you can work with Monique and I think Edie as well, and Maria, and I don't know, we can touch base with anyone from healthcare and anyone from Ways and Means if they want someone to weigh in as well. To just put something together that is going to work for the department and work for us as well. So I don't think we're looking for a deep dive. We'll leave that up to Doug. That's what he does.
Right.
But I think we can gather enough information, as long as we have a report, that we can gather enough information to make some, to understand what's going on in all of the departments that is in DFR as we go forward too. And maybe it could be as simple as having a report once every 2 years that, just before a biennium starts. So maybe, Edie and I were discussing that. Maybe it's a report that we get in November, so that whoever's going to be sitting in these chairs can make a decision of, do we need to put any legislation in to deal with some things that are happening, get some ideas and move forward. And I think it would help committee members as well, especially new ones that are coming in, to see that report. So that's another thing we were thinking about, something we'll talk about. Perfect.
Yeah, I concur with that. I would always concur with that. I didn't read this bill as being, I didn't think it was asking for as much as you might have thought.
Yeah.
And I think, as I think folks have mentioned, there are probably ways that you can use your existing data and mechanisms to, really just give a heads up to legislators around what you folks do.
Yeah.
And I think that'd be value, and that touches on something else. I don't think personally, I don't think there's any implication that you're not transparent. It's more, in my mind, and you have a lot on your public website. It's more a matter, I think, communicating to legislators around what you do. And I think sometimes people don't see that. And sometimes, because they don't see what you're doing around consumer complaints and things like that, they might tend to want to do something more than might duplicate what you're already doing.
Right. Yep.
So I think that's the positive intent Encourage you to work with
Yeah.
Lady of Money.
And maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, the department is very proud of the work. We do a lot, as you know. So we're happy to, to provide that transparency in whatever the committee feels is the right way. So.
Doug has his hand up. Go ahead, Doug.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Two quick thoughts. First, because DFR has 4 divisions, for lack of a better word, industry insiders know exactly where to go to get information. The general public, most policymakers, auditors, we have to work pretty hard. There's no question about how much information is available, but something to think about. I would encourage you to just put a table of contents, a link to a table of contents on your main page, and let everybody know, if you don't know where you are or where you're going, we can help.
Yeah.
That's easier said than done. The other thing is, with regard to the state's annual outcomes report, the PPMB, I'm not a big fan, and I just looked at it, and 2 of your 4 divisions have exactly 1 measure. And that's not what you report in your budget submission to APROPS. You give them a lot more information. So I wouldn't put much reliance on the value of the PPMB. And I'm sorry, we did a report on that, so I'm not just making it up, and I'm not being rude. Well, maybe I am. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Just to echo our chair, I would be, in my ideal world, I would like to see a 25-page PowerPoint presentation with a quick summary of everything I need to know and links to drill down deeper if I want to know a little more information.
Yeah.
That would be my ideal world.
Okay.
And also echo the chair and what Tony just said. I'm looking at your website and it is incredibly technical
No.
and very hard to decipher, and especially as
I know.
new lawmakers, because you deal with some important issues. We
Yeah.
kind of have to get ourselves up to date pretty quick. So at least having some like visuals and I'm not sure this may be an actual whole entire state of Vermont website UX thing. So I really don't diving too deep, but yeah, it would be, I think the suggestion about putting at least a table of contents or just easy clickings would be very helpful.
To go back to what the commissioner said about our technology and resources, our website, I will be the first to admit, as I said, I even find sometimes it's hard to navigate the information. That is something I'm aware of. I know Sandy is, so we need to work on that and make that better.
Do you have resources to do that?
So we have a PIO who is also kind of charged with the website piece of DFR. That has been challenging because a public information officer doesn't necessarily have the tech skills to do the website, and we don't have an internal IT staff anymore. We used to, like other departments, I know. So I think it's been challenging to have that expertise in-house to apply for someone who understands what we do.
Right.
And then can apply it to the website. That's the challenge, right? Because as you all have said, it's super complicated. And if you don't understand what it is we do, you're not going to be able to organize the data in a way that makes sense. So I take that feedback and, I think that is something we need to work on and improve in the coming year. So.
Sandy? Do you have more of that?
Oh, yes, thank you. I didn't hear you were calling on me, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Yes, so Emily made some good points. Appreciate that. And going to the website, I would say that was one of the areas that I was pointing to or looking to point to when I said we're constrained by technology and what we have for technology and the staffing resources. That is has been on our wish list for many, many years. We are financial regulators and not website designers. So we are looking, just to clarify, we would love to have either the ability to have expertise in-house, or be able to outsource it at a moment's notice, because in financial regulation, things are always changing, and we need to be able to update things that again, we want to be as publicly transparent as possible, and having a easy to navigate website has been on our wish list for a very long time. And I also wanted to make the point about us being financial regulators. We are responsible. We design our processes and procedures, whether it's investigations, examinations, analysis, to monitor the companies that we regulate. And we have high standards and expectations of our companies, and to make sure that things are operating smoothly and governed appropriately. And as financial regulators with that type of oversight over the companies we regulate, we too are very, committed to making sure that DFR and the things that we do internally are operating smoothly. So I just wanted to make sure, for the committee's purpose, that we are doing the best we can with reporting and transparency and making things publicly available, but we aren't missing a beat when it comes to carrying out the work that we need to do to protect Vermonters.
Thank you. Monique?
Yeah, thanks, everyone. I think just looking through some of the other state reports, like New Hampshire, for instance, like in looking through the Vermont like DFR website, there's a lot of information, but yeah, it's like sometimes like I couldn't navigate to find like rulemaking, for instance. I had to search for it, and it's like in a buried PDF somewhere. So one of, like I said, when I introduced this, one of the kind of triggers for this was having testimony last year where there was a question about insurance policies, and then it came out in testimony that we had asked how are insurance companies, how do they keep up with all of the rules that you're making, all of the laws that we're passing? And so, for instance, like a page of the New Hampshire report is like, here are the changes that happened last year. And like you have rulemaking documents, but they're buried and you have to know how to search for the word rulemaking. And so that's not only like a protection for the insurance companies that need to keep up with this, but I would expect that it's also a protection for consumers who need to know how they can actually push back against insurance companies, or just as an example, it could be banks, it could be payday lenders, it could be whatever it is. But then also New Hampshire reports like it's a lot of like Virginia, like a lot of it feels like it's just like a dump of a database of like, what were the new banks that popped up this year? And like, but also there's like, to Tony's point, like just like PowerPoint type charts where it's like, how does Vermont compare to other states and all the different entities? And it feels like an opportunity to find things like the fees that we need to adjust, but it also feels like an opportunity to maybe like brag by having a chart that compares us to other states when it comes to things like captives. So it feels like there's a lot of opportunities for the department to showcase the things that it's doing, while also making it easier for its customers and consumer, like as far as businesses go, but also like consumers that are trying to navigate the resources they have to depend on for their lives every day.
I'm kind of hearing like a two-part piece, of this making sure the information we have is easily accessible, but then also making sure we're doing a good job of coming in and educating not only the public, you all, and so I think that's great. Yeah, thank you.
Just gonna add, because Moni said most of what I was gonna say, but I also be able to translate from the technical to the lay person. And I think that's a piece that is missing right now. So again, we, as Herb said, as many people said around the table, I don't think there is an issue. There's not a feeling that there isn't transparency. There's not a feeling of any of that. There is just a feeling of we are not those technical experts, and it's our job to be able to have that oversight and understanding so that we can support the good work of the site. And so I think that's the bridge that we're really trying hard to create here.
So I think do you want to be part of the group that
Yeah, I can
would.
do a better job than I did.
Maybe opportunity for others to learn from you. Um, Yeah, so if we can, yeah, whoever, Emily, Sandy, with Maria and with Herb and Monique and Edie, we can sit down and take a look and rewrite, make sure we can get what we're looking for and we're not overburdening you with another report. Yeah.
That sounds great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, committee.
Thank you.
Stuff.
Well, let's, okay. Now we'll switch to H137. Not here yet. Okay. Why don't we take like 5, and we'll wait for Todd to get here.